Oh, guys, it's 6 o'clock. You want to dial in Heidi?
Okay. I'm getting her on that.
We're going to dial. Heidi's going to participate remotely. Cal is in Japan, so he won't be here.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, you're on speaker.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Can you hear everybody okay? I think that is a no. Heidi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Make a note that Kyle's absent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Got it. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve and adopt the agenda, please.
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, Mr. Zykan, it's you do or die.
I'll do it.
All right.
Are you ready for me?
What's the agenda item, please?
We're going to say the, what is it, the RSP
Okay.
analysis,
Okay.
or as it relates there too.
All right. Fair enough.
And so to be as brief as possible, obviously, about it, back when we started talking about expanding the school district 2 years ago, the original plan was to add 8 classrooms at East. But by February of 22, in an effort to save costs, that was eliminated down to 4 classrooms. At today's construction rates, that's an estimated cost savings of $1 to $1.2 million. We were able to find $15 million extra for the high school. We were able to find the $1.4 million extra for the architect. We were able to come up with $3.5 million for the football stadium, with an additional $2 million on top of that for American food groups. But the enrollment analysis was just completed, and of course, what they've determined is we're going to be out of space in our elementary schools in a couple of years. So just one of those situations where perhaps we should have done this before we made all the expansion plans to have a better handle on what was needed and where and at what cost, because I think we're going to find ourselves going through this again here very shortly.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the 2023 MOSIP annual meeting delegate proxy ballot. I'm assuming it's just vote for 2, and then we're going to just do 4 for the 2 people on the ballot.
And Mr. President, the only thing I would say to that, I know it's in the board docs that the board may not be very up to speed on that.
All right.
So it might need a little more of your description. I know that came in as a kind of a put in, to the workshop and special meeting. So maybe you could give a little description of it for the board. And if you don't need it, that's great. But you got, maybe particularly Beth, she gave me the assuring nod there. Are you?
Yeah, he ran through it with me just
I
a little bit.
apologize.
Yeah.
You've already beat me to the punch. Maybe we know what we're doing.
The only question we had on it was we can do it by ballot, by mail. We don't have to be there or participate virtually once we sign it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, and then you know the gentleman from Waynesville, and you're good with him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And the gentleman, the superintendent, you know him?
At Waynesville currently?
No,
Oh,
the other guy on the ballot.
I can't recall who it was.
It was the 20 residing.
Oh, yes, right, Web City, absolutely,
Okay, so you're good with both.
absolutely.
All right, any more discussion on that? I need a motion to approve the 4 for the gentleman from Waynesville and Web City.
So moved.
Second. Any more discussion? Excuse me. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? I heard 6-0. Employment, is anybody related to anybody in employment? Okay, I'm hearing nobody's related to anybody. So I need a motion to approve the employment recommendations as presented, as well as the resignations.
So moved.
Second. Excuse me, any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? I heard 6-0. Okay, so now before we do that, in order to get the RSP lady, you mind if we do her first and then?
I would like to do mine first,
Okay.
especially for Dave, unless day with the budget, and
However-
then I can catch you up on RSP if there's questions on that. If you're,
It's up to you, so we do the budget first, that's fine. I was just wanting to help her out.
I set the expectation with her that she might.
Okay.
I'll be done in an hour, hour and a half. and we'll-
Okay.
I've got my orders, Dave.
That's right.
Okay. And we're not, there was a few changes, almost all like periods or something, that like the budget, I mean, we work on that thing. That's why we do the special board meeting at the end of the month. So there are a few changes. I'll try to point those out, but I assure you they are very minimal, and then you can compare the two, but we'll upload the new presentation after tonight. And Veronica, if you see one that I changed, you might raise your hand or a pinky, and that'll. Next slide, please. So we'll get started here. These, the budget development goals, they are unchanged from last year, and so you're familiar with those. I always bold these two because these certainly, as we start working on next year's budget, are the ones that we're more focused on of the goals, I guess, so the focus areas of the goals. Next slide, please. And this kind of gives you a little bit of the, and this even confused me, I probably did in the board, but I had the word construction in there, and with all the focus on construction, I thought, oh, wait a minute, what did I do there? I had that but budget construction process, and we're right down here to the budget workshop. Our next thing will be budget approval here at the end of the month. Next slide. Okay, you know I like to go over this with you, and I don't think we can pound this enough, to be honest with you. So this is really just like the annual Secretary of Board report that we also show. So we're looking at the budget summary, the projected budget summary, but you're going to see it again 2 times at least. One is whenever we show you the ASBR, which I usually do, we'll say August, and then it gets audited. And usually the ASBR and audit are very close. I can tell you this budget summary, even though it's just a few weeks away, will not be the same exact numbers. They'll be pretty close, but it's going to change a little bit because we are still projecting. But also, to kind of break this down, you'll remember Fund 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fund 1 and 2, whenever I say operations, that's what we're talking about, operations. Fund 3 is the debt service for the general obligation bonds. The beautiful thing about that is it pretty much takes care of itself after the hard work of Proposition 6725 was approved. And Fund 4 is our capital projects, and then of course the total column. So I'm going to give myself a little more room. So I'm really going to move tonight. Get everybody where they need to be. Okay, next slide, please. One thing I like to do with you guys is just black this out there. We're going to look at it in just a minute, but operations here again, Fund 1 and 2. So if this works out perfectly, which here we're in June, I mean we're in the last month of it, so it's going to be pretty close. But where do we project to be? At about 34.5% reserves. Okay. Now, the only reason why that would change a great deal is if we maybe potentially do more transfers than what we're anticipating right now. So we could drop that down to 28%, but the money could be found to be over in Fund 4. But I anticipate we'll stay right around there, at least in the low 30s range. Don't anticipate to be much more than that. Well, actually, I think that's the top end of what we would see. So, incidental fund, Fund 2, the common question here is if we don't revenue money or much money into Fund 2, how do we pay for teachers? Through transfers. Okay, so typically like our entire tax rate oftentimes historically has been into Fund 1. It kind of our the move at the beginning of the year is just to move money into operations. For the most part, we don't care too much, and we'll default to Fund 1. But we typically have to subsidize Fund 2 because, as the board knows, the majority of our expenses are in teacher benefits and salary, and all those are paid out of Fund 2. So I'll jump you over. We're going to see these slides a few times here, so you can come back. And certainly in this workshop setting, it serves 2 purposes. If you have a question here and you need me to drill down on something, please make me aware. But also you have weeks from now till the end of the budget process to email me or call me to drill down on a question. And of course, as we know, we do that individually because our meeting is at the meeting time. But certainly if Mary has a question, Austin will have questions. You guys call me, come in, set an appointment, we'll drill down. But that can happen tonight too, the best we can. And that's why Veronica's here. All right, so Fund 3. This is where the general obligation bond debt is paid out of. And like I said, what we do, the mechanics of this are, after it's been approved, we actually send the information to the state auditor's office and they tell us what we're going to need to levy. Oftentimes, that's more than what our ceiling is. But whenever our ceiling was $1.20, this board had a history of always rolling back the levy. Typically, I've shown you information on that, but over like the last 15 years, that's been as much as 50 cents. It's been as little as just a couple cents. But one thing that we're certain is it will be 99 cents. It won't be more than that. Okay, we'll drill down in a little bit more on that in an upcoming slide. And then Fund 4 here is for capital projects, and you can see there our estimating fund balance. If I looked at this with no context to Wright City, I would say, oh my gosh, how can they be sitting on $44 million? Then I would think there's got to be something going on. We've sold our general obligation bonds, the money's there, and it's not been expended. Does that make sense? So the question you might have is, okay, if you take that general obligation money out, how much money do we have that's non-restricted, right? How much money do we have that we can do improvements to our site or subsidize future projects? About $8 million. So that's raised since 2021 from $680,000 to $8 million, but now that also includes the $2 million, which we could, talk about whether that's restricted or not. We know legally it's not restricted, the $2 million that was the gift from AFG, but is it restricted? Yes, because where's it going? Towards the project. That was their intent, and certainly we will follow through on that. So in just a relatively short time, we've increased our Fund 4 balances, and when you think, oh, well, in operations, you're at 30%, which I know this board knows because we talk about it, you guys learn about that stuff. 30% is healthy fund balances. And now we're getting to a more healthy fund balance in Fund 4, especially with the things we've got coming. It'll be important to try to get money into Fund 4. Does that make sense? I know that's a kind of a rush on that. We're going to drill down on some of that in here in upcoming slides too. So financially, fiscally, in terms of finances for FY23, really, really good year financially. Of course, that wasn't, that $8 million, that unrestricted $8 million, wasn't without intention. So think of some of the things we've done. One, the primary thing we did is we optimized our ESSER money. Now I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but kind of thinking like using that as a tease. We'll look at that in an upcoming slide. All right, next slide, because I'm going to start getting the hook from the board president here. Again, so that's the full picture. That's all funds. And that is the same format. We put that in the same format that you're going to see in the SPR, and just a little different format for the audit. Okay. Next slide. Now this, I love these next two slides, and this is something that you might ponder a little bit and then come back and go, okay, Chris, give me that again and tell me what that means. Historical revenue breakdown, like whenever I was looking at the district as a prospective superintendent, I thought, oh, this is a great situation, particularly, Waynesville's very exceptional because of the military installation, but in the other districts I had served, they were state funded, heavily state funded, like 70%. I liked the prospect of going into a district that was 40% state funded and 40% local, because in times where the economy, the ebb and flow of the economy over, say, a decade, and you are 70% reliant on state funds, you have to have balances to take care of that ebb and flow or make cuts. I mean, it becomes very difficult for school districts that are state funded. So I had 40% coming into Wright City to think, okay, because your local dollars, the primary revenue driver is going to be local taxes, and that's very stable. Even in times of when the economy takes a dip downward, do people still have to pay their property tax? Absolutely. But let's just take income tax or state tax that funds state revenues. When it goes down, that's what caused the dip. So obviously, school districts, state health, prisons, things that are the state's obligation, they get hurt whenever the state takes a dip. But if you're funded largely by local, that's a more stable revenue source. So I like that it was pretty balanced, if that makes sense. Okay, now this next slide surprised even me. That's where we are now. Now, what's happening to create that? Did our tax rate go up? No, right? Assessed value. So you kind of take your eye off that, or I did, because we were going through COVID, and you know, so what happened through COVID is the federal dollars jumped up. And I didn't look at that and pay it much mind, because that was every district in the state were receiving a large amount of federal dollars. Those things jumped up to in excess of 20%. But now we're back to what we'll say is the new normal. So you go through COVID. I said we had several cycles of new construction. Last year we probably had maybe a record-setting assessed value for our school district at nearly double digits. And you come back and as you're building budget for 2024, this has changed. Has it changed in a good way? I believe it has. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. One is, I'm not going to go over the whole thing again, but this is a more stable revenue source. That's one. The second reason is very complicated, but I'll give you just the surface of it. The state does not recognize this shift. Go back to the previous slide. The state formula recognizes this, and because the local assessed valuation has been frozen from the state's perspective since 2007. So go back to the next slide. So what I'm telling you is, in our formula, basically what the formula does is if you have a bunch of local revenue, you don't get as much state revenue. If you have you don't have very much, i.e. Conway, McLean County R1, a district I serve, we did not have any local, all AV, all agricultural land, no businesses, no, you know. And so the local revenue was low, so we got a lot of state money, okay? But back to my point is, the state doesn't see any change since 2007. So the state sees this as 127 million in assessed value, and now we're at 300 million assessed value. So we're still getting $4,000 a student, or ADA, but a nose, we'll say. But they don't account for our rapid growth of assessed value. This puts, yes?
Yeah, but if you look at the previous slide and this one, the biggest delta is the federal money. So I noticed that, why did our federal money drop so much?
I think because of the percentage of
So the actual dollar amount from the federal is just the percentage of it?
Yeah, that's right. The actual dollar amount for federal is pretty much static.
Okay, thank you.
No, good question. Let me go back. Okay, so let me tell you, Wright City is in a very, very good position moving forward. Now, there is a group of superintendents and probably pockets of superintendents around the state that are working on this, and I'm one of them. I'm in a group that was on a conference call today because there are going to be some changes to the formula. I don't think they're going to rewrite the formula, but I think they are going to make some adjustments, not for FY24. And if I was hedging bets, I would say there may not be any in the foreseeable future, meaning 3 or 4 years. But we do recognize inequities in the formula. You're looking at one. This is an inequity. We just happen to be on the right side of it. Okay? So I think there's going to be some changes in the future. I just don't know exactly how fast they're going to come. But I will tell you, we're going to benefit in the short term, if not, you know, a little longer than that, from this scenario. I like it, but you guys, I think, okay, you're at least giving me the sure nods, like, that kind of makes sense. So I'm going to leave it.
I don't know if this is a time to ask this or not, but I know Dr. Painsmith is really working on our assessor to reassess home values.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got any input on that or any foresight in that?
Yeah, I'm in communication with the assessor as recently as yesterday. And so I think there are going to be some changes possibly, but certainly I think we need, this is a perfect example, actually, we're looking at it. This makes it very much more important for me to be in tune with our local assessor. Because I'll provide a negative example. Last year when we came in and wrote FY23, I know not perhaps the couple new board members, but and maybe so, you guys too, Beth, trying to single you out. But you'll remember that we were really excited about the assessed value growth, but it was all new construction. But do you remember what went down that did blindside the superintendent and me? Or the superintendent and me, the superintendent and the board? It was that personal property went down. And the issue, if you remember, was Refresco, and I think I'm mispronouncing that, bought Coca-Cola. They came in and reappraised their personal property, and we took a significant hit. Now, if it weren't for the new construction growth that we had, that could have had an impact on our district. But it just, that new construction far outweighed the hit that we took, though it was significant, from that reappraisal or reassessment of Refresco's personal property in our district. So while personal property overall went up, whenever you drill down into that, personal property for a significant business in our community, their personal property went down. So those are some things that we're working with the assessor in terms of communication. And as this ticks up 60, 62% moving forward, Mary, we have to have good communication, and that's got to improve on both ends, the districts and certainly the assessor. That's a little bit away from your question about general reassessment. And so we know that for a couple decades that there has not been any local reassessment. We're just living off of new construction. I know Dr. Klingensmith and Warrington are kind of leading the charge on some of those communications, but he certainly keeps me looped in. I'm certainly talking to Katie about those things too. So good ones.
It's kind of, it's political, so.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue for our community, for sure, and our county.
So one of the things I think you need to look into is Hancock. So recall that if the value of my house is 100,000 and it goes up to 150, we can't claim all that additional 50,000. We can only claim
CPI, 5%, or actual reassessment. Which one is lower?
Yeah, lower. So I'm curious what that's going to do to our tax rate when that reassessment comes in, because we're not going to be able to tax as much, I would think, right?
And so if I make it just a generalization, if we are realizing assessed value growth and really new construction doesn't go against Hancock, so maybe I'm sorry.
I'm talking about like reassessment.
I'm getting there, sorry. So if we had a year or back-to-back years, which that wouldn't happen because they reassess every other year unless Mrs. Smith does something that I'm unaware of. But if we had for a couple of reassessment cycles, which are on the odd year, of radical growth, we would not capture all that revenue for the exact reasons why you said. And so what does Hancock, that's after Mel Hancock, Senator out of Springfield, this is his bill, Hancock, and it was modeled after California, but what it did was if you go through a reassessment cycle and the reassessment jumps too much, how are you going to keep the school district from receiving a windfall of money? You're going to lower your taxes. So again, much like our debt service, that goes to the state auditor's office and they calculate that. So our patrons would never be at risk of having an increase above 5% CPI or actual reassessment.
Now, but the question I would ask you, and this is an August question, but if it happens, right now we're assessing 99 to Fund 3, and then the balance to the operating. The question would be, would there be a potential where that 99 cents would go down because
Hancock does not impact debt service.
Okay, so it would just be operating.
That's right. Good question. Good question. That's some drill down stuff. Okay, good. And I'm pleased with that. That's good. You guys are really in tune, and that's not surprising. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so kind of getting to it. So again, the budget is going to be a work in progress right up until the board approves it. But right now, on current taxes, we built everything that you're going to see in the later slides on 4 to 7%, actually 5%, but that's the range we're using on the new construction. Prop C is projected to go up. So Prop C is the statewide sales tax. It's under local. It's always confusing, even for some seasoned CFOs and board members. But that's a 1982 issue where the districts rolled back their levies and a statewide sales tax supplanted that revenue. So it's coded as local, but it's a statewide sales tax. State revenues are going to be flat. Now that's certainly a concern of ours, and that's certainly a concern of the gentleman I was talking to in my conference call. But where that's really, really tough is in Laclede County R1 in Conway, Missouri. It may be in Ellsbury. A lot of the school districts in the EMO, if you're not going to see the basic formula, the primary revenue driver, generate more revenue unless you're growing kids. Now, if you're growing kids, you're also growing expenditures, right? So I won't say that it's completely neutral, but at some point, we could grow 20 kids and maybe absorb them and benefit from that additional revenue per nose. But eventually, we're going to have to go hire a teacher. So it pretty much stays out level. But if you're in a rural area and your AV is not growing and you're not getting new state money, you're not going to get new federal money outside of some catastrophe like a global pandemic or something where they start, flowing some money. It can be really tough. So again, that's why we are in such a great situation. We have 60% of our revenues going to be local now, moving forward, and nothing, we wouldn't think, there is nothing foreseeable that would deter that. So there's the assumptions. Those are just, right from DESE's recommendations. This is one I want to point out. We took a gamble last year. We thought before the state budget had committed to this that they were going to fund transportation at 100%. Now that's tricky to say that. They fund transportation at 100%, but 100% is only 75% of allowable expenses. But that is the first time I went back and looked it up because I've always said, I don't know that if it was ever funded since I've been in central office, which is getting to be quite a few years. It had not been funded last year since 1991, fully funded. That meant that equaled $500,000 for us. That was significant. So you say, okay, now that they funded that transportation, $500,000, did that $500,000 have to go to transportation? Yes, but that's okay because we were subsidizing at $500,000. So it freed up $500,000 that we could put to, and we know what we do with it. We typically will, there are things to take care of, but a large portion of that goes to our people, and trying to stay competitive. So it may not be on a future slide. I hope it's not because that means that becomes the norm. But we're only 2 years into that. And so it was a good gamble last year. We gambled for our people. And this year it really wasn't discussed too much. Now, there are folks, depending on who you talk to, say they can't hold that. But if they can't hold that, I'm probably optimistic that it'll stay for the foreseeable future. Federal will stay flat, and just so you know, outside of Veronica, there may be some change out there that we would do on an FER, but all the ESSERs are done. Anything significant. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're talking about that local revenue, 5111, the primary revenue driver. That is our historical tax rate. All this doesn't matter over here, and I would ask you not to focus there. You certainly can, but that's just historical. Those are just dummy numbers. Okay, they're off of a AV that's probably 2 or 3 years ago at least. I just clicked that. This is what I want you to focus on, 445. So historically, what we know is we were running 325 in the general fund, $1.20 in debt service, and 445. When we went out for Proposition 67 and 25, what we were asking people, if you remember, is we're going to keep your levy at 445. Just let us put the levy where it needs to go to optimize the revenues to do what we need to do. So moving into 23, next slide, please. This is what it looked like. So we ran 276 into the general fund to pay for operations. We paid debt service, we lowered it to 99 cents, and we ran 70 cents in Fund 4, 21 cents of paid for, click it one more time, I think I added something to this. Yeah, okay. 21 cents to pay for the lease purchase, principal and interest, and 49 cents was subtracted from that 325 up here. So let me simplify that. The first question I would say, I would ask if I was looking at that was like, can you pay for all your operations with 276? I mean, the state minimum is 275. That's just a penny. I don't want to play the game. I'm looking for someone that knows. I know, and Aaron's not giving me that look.
Oh, I know.
Oh, what did we do there, Mr.
ESSER.
Jones? ESSER. We put all of our ESSER in there to supplant salaries, and said, oh great, we can take the approximately $1 million that we were supplanting in there, and take that levy out, run that levy in Fund 4 to help build our Fund 4 balances. And I know you guys are familiar with that. I know it's just hard to come into the board meeting and had the superintendent up there.
On the tip of my tongue.
And I said Aaron's name out loud, so I singled out Beth and Aaron. I'll start picking on the guys now. So 445 is the number that we need to really communicate to our community, because this can do something different. This will probably stay 99 cents and potentially go down 70 cents. I'm not certain what we're going to do, but I'm going to show you in the next slide what I think we might do. I don't have to know till August. I don't even have the AVs from either Lincoln County or Warren County, but I think we're likely to be around 325, back to that, 99 cents in debt service, and 21 cents in capital projects. The only thing I would tell you is, potentially, I may run just a little bit more here, and there's a benefit to doing that, because there's a revenue source that's proportional to your tax rate in Fund 4. So I really kind of need to know what other school districts in the county are doing, sort of, and then I may be able to benefit by getting extra money, not just transferring money, but getting extra money. And I'm not talking about big money. I'm talking about tens of thousands of dollars, maybe $30,000 to $50,000 more. But those pennies, and that's more than pennies, certainly add up. So you can, but here's what you can call me to the carpet on, obviously, on anything. But you can call me to the carpet if that ever gets above 445. But we're all going to be called to the carpet on that, because we promised our community that's where the levy's staying for the foreseeable future. Right? We can't talk about future boards or future super, but for the foreseeable future, 445 is what we're going to be. And again, these numbers are a little bit better, but they're fluid. We're working through those, and they'll work. So these numbers aren't exact yet. They were just a snapshot of what I took at that point of budget when we were building it.
Did I miss something, or may you still move some of the general fund, the 325, down to the capital projects?
That is correct. I would think if I do anything, it'll be about 20 cents.
Yet for this year's budget?
Not for this year's, for FY24.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, FY24. And Dave, and I'll give you this crutch, picked on the ladies, or at least two of them. I'll help you out here. Even when Veronica and I are working on budget, sometimes we correct each other because we jump from FY23 to FY24. It's real easy to do, especially when you're putting a presentation in June where you're coming out of one year right into the next one. But yeah, FY24, and we don't know this, and even when the board approves the budget at the end of this month, we still don't know, because a little nuance or intricacy of Missouri school finance is you write your budget before you have your assessed value, and you set your tax rate in August after the budget has been approved, and actually after you've started the school year. So it's odd a little bit. Next slide, please. And that's just a comparison, and the big thing to focus therein is, but what is the total tax levy historically? 445. FY23 was a wild year. We were doing that Esser trick, 445. What are we proposing in FY24? 445. That's the number. Flexibility is great. We appreciate the patrons trusting us, and we've got to fulfill that commitment. Make sure that we can do everything we need to do at that 445 level, which is still relatively low in our region, particularly if you go east. Next slide, please. Now, remember, I said state budget or state revenues were going to be relatively flat. So there's not a lot to talk about there. You know, even when we talk about revenue, the primary revenue driver is the 5311 is the state formula. Here's the state formula in a graphic form, maybe one that you can digest a little easier. Weighted ADA, you've heard ADA. We do get some weighting factors like EL kids. We get a little more credit for them, free and reduced lunch, and IEP. But weighted ADA, or ADA, times the state adequacy target. That's 63.75 this year, and it was 63.75 last year. It didn't change, right? It's not projected to change without a tweak to the formula in the foreseeable future. That's why there's a concern. The dollar value modifier is another term we could use. It's not used in school finance, but is cost of living. So does it cost more to live in Warren County than it does in Laclede County? Yes. But ironically, this went down this much. Our dollar value modifier went down how much?
0.01.
0.01. So not significant, but it went down, which was a little surprising. Local effort. Local effort but not today's local effort, 2007's local effort. I mean, I have a marker, and Andrea's not in here. I could put on there 2007, because that local effort is froze. Even on our formula, the 127 million just goes along. It's pretty wild for Missouri, and that equals state funding. And none of those things are changing, are they? One thing can change. Apologize. Could this change? ADA change? Thanks, John. I'll catch you up with you tomorrow. ADA is noses. Do we anticipate to have fewer noses or more noses? More noses, which in theory would generate more ADA. So we could see an increase, but again, it's pretty much equal because at some point we got to pay. So if we, I don't know, at risk of being redundant there. So state money, flat. Next slide, please. I think this is one that Mr. Jones asked me to put in. So it looks wild, though. We didn't, whenever we talked about, or when you texted me this, I didn't realize how wild it would look because I had overlooked this. Veronica told me it was going to look different, and I was like, okay, whatever, just let's make the slide. And then when we came back to it, I was like, oh my gosh, that does look wild. So, because why does it look wild? What are we doing in capital projects? $55 million school, right? Or $55 million first bid package or first package. And debt service, takes care of itself, operations. So we look like our budget. If a colleague of mine asked me what our budget was, and I said, that number, you might say, what do you got? 4,000, 5,000 kids? No, we're just got a big construction project going on right now. Oh, you must have like 30 million of that in Fund 4 then. Yes. Next slide. Redundant slide. I just love to put this up in front, and whenever I'm doing anything like with the chamber, wherever, retired teachers, they get it. Our people get it because I've beat it into their head now. When we approve salary schedules, we have done almost the entire budget, right? 80% of our operations budget, and it was more than that a little bit, Veronica. 82% this year, I think, is in our people. Next slide, please. Okay, revenues, right? Now we'll shift to expenditures. So when we're talking about expenditures, again, we got to take care of this salaries piece, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Our health insurance went up 7%, 7.7, and that's going to cost us about $78,000. 7% increase. That's significant. But keep in mind, our previous 2 years, we've had a pass and actually a drop. So 7%, usually the alarm goes off when you hit double digits. And then you really got to dig in why. We're sick is what that would be, is our cost of claims ratios went out the roof, and our carrier is going to make us pay for that.
So did our cost of claim go up this year?
It went up, yeah. It went up, but what I'm saying is we really dig in. I mean, I've got some.
Well, when you answered the question, when that's why insurance went up. So.
I've served on consortium boards the majority of my career, and so I can dig into that. But we can talk about pooling points, catastrophic claims, and what our consortium is doing to try to keep those.
And we're still going through Ed Plus, right?
We are. We're in the Ed Plus consortium. They've actually technically peeled away from Ed Plus, but we're still in that consortium. Of course, staffing, and as you're growing, staffing is an issue. So you've got the staffing pieces down there below, and so if you take the 78,000 and the 508,000, we got to find $600,000 just to maintain our staffing and our health insurance, our staffing aides, our health insurance, and we haven't even talked about a salary increase yet, right? Next slide. Salary cost. This is very similar to this is the slides I provide and present to the salary committee, and you've seen them in this format before. So just to move our schedule vertically and potentially horizontally. So vertically, if you're up at the base, everybody gets a step. We haven't froze, I don't think ever at Wright City, but we haven't froze in recent memory. Uh-oh.
We've had before.
Oh, never mind. Delete that. Oh, God. You haven't frozen the last 3 years. So you're going vertical, and then she does a projection of what potentially will happen based on historical averages horizontally. Because our teachers can increase, obviously, by a step in your experience, but also by getting a higher degree, from a BS to an MS. So just to move the salary schedule, we got to find almost $250,000. And then if we had 1%, you're now at 300,000. Next slide. $400,000 for 2%. 3%, we got to find $500,000 on top of what we talked about, that $500,000 earlier. Next slide, please. 591, and then finally this 684. And I got to tell you, this was my target. I felt like we needed to do this in talking to other superintendents and finding out what they were doing. And that, on a normal year, is a very aggressive step. I'm not sure how aggressive it is. We'll find out as you know, after everybody gets their stuff approved. But that was the target, and at least what I've got proposed going into our June budget approval. That's where we're at. That's what Veronica's built this on. So next slide, please.
So you got revenues to support that?
I have revenues to support that. I'm going to show those in just a second.
All right.
So I may need some help from Veronica. I don't think so. I think I'm going to remember this. But so what about market value comparisons? And you guys know that we've done market value increases on things. So through the salary committee process and outside of the salary committee process, we can get feedback that, hey, we are under market value on whatever position. We look at that, we see where we're at, and we make a decision as to whether we're going to need to make a change or not. Our impact leaders, and I think most of these the board members know, this is why we have an 81% on our APR. Collective teacher efficacy has carried the day and will carry the day moving forward. That's not bringing in some magical program. That's our teachers meeting every week to talk about, we took an assessment, he and I teach the same thing. My kids did better than his kids, of course. And what did I do that he can learn from? But it's usually 5 teachers sitting in a group and talking about that, okay? And so it can be everything from teaching strategies, primarily so, but everything else, pace, it could be several things. But right now, and a lot of districts, it's very common, it's more common now that they're impact or PLC leads or whatever, but department chairs, that's been around forever. But you just got basically a stipend for ordering the textbooks or whatever, Now these people work. This is a job. They get paid an $800,000 stipend. Right now the budget is built on moving that to $1,200. Okay. Okay, I don't have the number up there, but you'll see it in just a minute on what the fiscal note on that is. Summer school, I won't talk about that because you're familiar with that. We did that so we could recruit for summer school this year. So that was action already taken. I'll give you the fiscal note on that again. Our maintenance director, it's so hard, I wanted to do a little preamble on comps. My gosh, comps. Who in the world is Wright City comp against? We are in a conference because those are like schools. But we don't think we're just like all those schools in the emo. So what do? We go over to Winsville and Francis Howell. I only want to comp the superintendent when we compare those schools. Only. So who do we comp with? So it does drift a little bit for at least certified in the CSIP. Dr. Way, from feedback we've gotten from salary committee staff and then all the way up to the CSIP, are trying to identify a group that stays static. And there are some in that group that we don't think we can catch in the foreseeable future, if ever. But we want to continue to try to close the gap, if that makes sense. So that was my preamble in short. But here we looked at that, and I just put that one out there for an example for you, so that's a little bit in the weeds. And so it's not way out of whack, but the budget is built on a $1,500 increase to our maintenance director. Counselors, I have no information for you tonight on this. This is something I'm still working on. I don't know whether it will be in my budget proposal, so it is not in this budget. Okay. Athletic stipends, that's a weedy one, and I'm trying to simplify it, and so looking at the next slide. Coach Evans, RAD, did a lot of work on this, some preliminary work, and then Veronica, I should have said, and I'll probably miss it at the end, so I'll say now, has done an excellent job on all of this, and she's put up with me, because it is just a rat race from now till the end of the month. So he did some groundwork on this for us. And so we took this as a comparison group. And I really do like this comparison group. This really feels like school districts that largely are much like us. And here are some things about our coaches' stipends, athletic stipends, that I want you to have some understanding of. So it's a percent of the previous year's base. So it's very common for school districts to say, okay, here's a base, or wherever your base is, and there's a percent that we're going to pay on the base, and that's what you're going to get for X stipend, or for X sport, or X activity. But it is all over the place. It is hard to get apples to apples. Some have it bracketed like you're on the base for the first 10 years, and then the next 10 years, you're at step 15. So it's not the base in the top left corner of the salary schedule. It's down here to step 15. Some it's negotiated still. Some, particularly rural schools, it's negotiated per sport. Now that's pretty rare now, but there are, I can find you one, you know. So this was pretty good, and we drilled down as best we could. But ours is the percent of the previous year's base. So cell 1, right? Previous year's base. That was exceptional to me. I didn't understand that, why we do that. There's a reason why I'm worried with it now. Head sports range from 10 to 12%. Administrative practice, not board policy, but our administrative practice was only credited with years experience within the district. So keep in mind, now that's been the practice here at Wright City for however long, certainly in my tenure here. And so if we had an emo coach that had some connection to Wright City, and we were trying to recruit him or her, we could not, per our administrative practice, honor their years coming in. Not only that, I got you, Aaron. Not only that, if we had somebody in district who came to our district, and maybe they were from the emo, and they could make more money even not coaching here, and we needed as an assistant coach, and we came to Dr. Wade and said, Dr. Wade, we want you to coach, and we know you had a great, run at Ellsbury or whatever, and he says, okay, how much are you going to get? You're going to get step 1 of the previous year's schedule. Those are things that were handcuffing us a little bit. Aaron?
So, I guess that was my understanding is that head sports range from 10 to 12% of the previous year's base for everybody. So are you saying that if you're a 5-year coach, then your percentage is now based off of
Previous year's cell 1.
cell 1? Okay, so for any of our coaches, that's what it is.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, just
Yeah.
want to clarify.
Yeah, so and we don't have any that I'm aware of, Jeremy, I'm not going to look at you. We don't have any deals. We've certainly not done any deals since I've been here. And if we did a deal, because we're trying to recruit a coach, that comes to the board. But we just haven't had a history of doing that. And there certainly are very good districts that do that. It's in play. We just haven't been afforded that opportunity, I guess. All right, so here's where we rank. Football, volleyball, of those 13, softball, cross country, cheer, basketball, I think, or baseball, but they're both ranked the same. Wrestling, dance, that's what we currently rank. We probably did not realize we were there, because that's comparison schools, right? Okay, so here's what we're writing the budget on, what I'll be proposing, I believe, later in the month. Next slide, please. Okay, same comps. Recommendation, increase 2% to high school and 1% to middle school, current year's salaries, current year's base. So not last year's base, whatever we do, whatever the board does at the end of the month, all the contracts would change and go to that current year's salary schedule. So that's going to raise all stipends.
How will we be able to market that if we don't, to a coach that you're trying to hire in March, if we don't have the budget till June?
Yeah, we do it in June, and I like that. I think probably, and that's been a little my influence too, because keep in mind we were coming out of COVID, and I'm conservative by nature fiscally. I know you guys know. So I like to make those decisions when we have the most information we possibly can. Could we do the salary schedule earlier, particularly on a good year, where everything was forecasted out? Absolutely. But right now, I've drug us down to making decisions. I want all the information I can get before I bring it to the board. It's a good question, and certainly, whenever I'm talking to my colleagues, some of my colleagues do it very, very early. I can tell you, they would all like to do it what I have in June. If you have your preference, you'd much rather have it later.
Well, is that the reason that we've used the previous years?
No, the previous years, from our understanding, and I think Veronica is more confident in it than what I'm, but is that you don't have to redo contracts. Once you put that contract out, there's not that labor in reissuing the contract. Just that simple. So what does that do to our ranking? You can see. And I tell you, I think this strikes the chord. You know, I mean, you can give me 3, give me 0.5%, 1.5%, but it strikes the chord because I don't think that we want to see us go to number 1 all in one, you know. Because I think that puts us out of balance of what we're here for. Because you guys hear me talk about what are we here for? Academic performance. Can I revisit this next year? I think so. And might bring something to you, you know, in the future. Could it be 3 years from now? Maybe. But so I like what it did. It took us basically in the top third of that comparison group. So what did it do to the rankings? Now we're at 5, 3, 3 across the board. Do I think this makes all the coaches jump for joy? No. But will they be appreciative of this? Absolutely. Because remember, they brought this to me every year I've been here. Questions on that piece?
What's the fiscal note of that?
It's coming. If she put it in. So if it's not in there, it's on Veronica.
Touch it now.
Okay, I love this slide, and I'm going to take some time here, and I'll try to be pretty quick. But I'm going to ask you to hit that link, Elizabeth, and I'm going to ask you to follow my finger because I thought I was driving on this, but I like that you are. You remember this? This is right out of MSTA. And go up just a little bit. Now, don't touch anything because I don't want to give anything away yet. So orientate yourself to the graph. This is the amount of money, salary. This is the estimated enrollment. So there are districts with fewer than 20 students in the entire district. Okay, 50, 100, 200. So we're going to be between this 1,000 and 2,000. Don't follow my finger yet. But here's something neat, and I was just talking to Beth about this. Beth, look what happened. Do you see this? That's not a mistake. When I put that up, I went, what in the world is that? You know, and Beth, now I'll give you the easy answer if I can put you on the spot. What is that? Oh, I apologize, and I will not do it again. This is a horrible thing for me to do. The state minimum.
Okay.
That moved everybody up. Point at that first one right here. That moved Spickard R2 that I'm going to assume did not have a $38,000 base salary. And then you can just go across there, just spot check a few, Elizabeth. Middle Grove, that put everybody at that 38,000 because that represents all the districts that were not at 38,000, and because of that one time and now 2 times, Grant have been pushed up there. But let's get to it. Let's go to this 1,000 to 2,000 and probably more to this side, like follow my finger if you can there. Let's look at that one. Who is that? It's Donovan at Southeast Missouri. You can see their base. Willow Springs, Southwest Missouri. Centralia, I don't know where. Dallas County, just north of Laclede County, that's Buffalo. This is town. Clinton, you're going too fast. Go to this one right here. Who's that over here? A little smaller. Oh, Cameron, okay. Go on up. Dunklin, don't go up yet. Go up, oh, don't go up. Go to that one right there.
Sorry,
That's
I'm
a
not
two-
looking at the same
Okay. All right. Now, so listen. Slowly, bring your laptop here. Okay, go to that one right there, and then just work your way up, but let us look at each one. There's Hollister. That's a very similar district to us demographically, or I think so. Maybe Jenna will tell me differently here. Bayless, work your way up. St. Jen, oh, that way.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Oh, I saw this. Go over. Wright City. Okay, so look, there are many districts, now this is base salary, that are ahead of us at 42,276. That feels really good. I mean, that looks good. Go up there, not to that one because I don't want anybody to see that one because that might be perceived as a comparison school. Go to that one over there. Hancock Place, okay? St. Louis, right in town. So yeah, you can go to that. You can Google for it, go in there and you can play around. Go over here and look. And where's the urban districts? Point at 3 of those. Hazelwood, Francis. There's Francis Howell. Let's look at them. 42,221. Park Hill and Kansas City. How about those two? And then we'll be done with this.
Wait.
Parkway and St. Louis City, which St. Louis City did a huge increase to their salary, and they plan to be #1 next year in the entire
Well, and
state.
then they're advertising for teachers too.
They are doing a good job, Mark,
They are,
I think, and
yeah.
I couldn't be happier that they are too. So, okay, everybody good with that? Go in there and play with that on your own. It's kind of cool. Close it out, or do whatever. Thank you. Okay, but that was the good. What's the bad is we live in this reality. So here's Wright City. We are, and this is only why choose masters in 16 and step 15. That's the salary committee brought that to me as, hey, but here's the problem, and I've used what they've used. So this was actually last year that they brought this. So, you know, what was a little bit of a surprise for the board, on the back end of the schedule, we didn't even beat Warrenton until this year. Now we beat them. Troy and Washington, I'll say, are within reach. And we need to close the gap on Wentzville and Francis Howell, but I will make you no promises that that can happen in the next 10, 20 years. I just, you know, their tax base is, and there is a correlation between tax base and
Well, they got a higher operating levy too by almost $1.
Great point. Great point.
I mean, if our patrons want to come to us, we can go to our patrons and say, give us an extra $1 or whatever, give us an extra $1, and we could throw it at that bottom right of the salary schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you're going to make that up.
Yeah. That's a great point, because there is another factor here. It is assessed value, but it's tax rate, what you're multiplying against that assessed value. All right, I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit. Next slide, please. So last year's action, you'll remember the vertical and horizontal movement, and then we added 4%, and we did a couple market value increases. What next? This year's, I think, am I there yet? Go to the next slide. Oh yeah, okay, preliminary plan. So this is going to make Mr. Jones a little bit nervous because he's going to wonder where I'm getting this money. Vertical and horizontal movement, 5% increase to the base. Staffing increases. Insurance. Back of the schedule right now, we built this on $800 that starts in year 20. Very similar to what we did the previous year. So remember, when we do something to the base, it flows through the schedule and helps the back. But we're putting a little extra help at the back with that $800. Okay, is the proposal. Yes, Dave?
On one of your earlier slides, when you showed 5% base, it was 600 and some thousand.
684. I think I was just looking at that, Dave, because I thought the same
Is
thing.
that because you're vertical?
Classified is included in that 684 too.
That is right.
Yes,
And-
that you, those numbers added.
Yeah, these two, and then also one of the differences is classified versus the just certified, right? But the big key difference is you've got to, whatever my 5%, yeah, it's my 5% and my vertical and horizontal.
Okay.
Don't rattle me, Dave. It's a good question, and you can rattle me anytime, of course. So I got $1.3 million. Next slide. So how are we going to pay for it? So in current taxes, based on 5% of AV growth, we're going to generate 1.1 million. Okay, so I think we can do better than that, but I think that's safe. You know, I think that's relatively safe. Prop C, we'll get $250,000 from Prop C growth, so that's sales tax. That's the one that I wouldn't bet on. In fact, we're not even using DESI's number in that. If you listen to the gloom and doomers, we are poised for a plateau and potentially a slowdown in the economy. So we'll see. Flat, 1.4. Salary increases, all that stuff summed together. The market value increases, the fiscal note, and actually, Mr. Jones, I fibbed to you because we don't have those broke out. I think we can get that for you easy enough.
We were on the last slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. $78,000 for the insurance, the staffing and program increases because of our anticipated increase. And keep in mind, it may sound like I'm sending two messages, and I am. One is that we are anticipating more students, and that's why I came to you and asked for staffing and program increases. But we're still fiscally conservative, and I have no increases right now in ADA growth. None. So let's let the kids get here before we spend the money. But based on our balances, based on what we think is a pretty safe projection, we're going to have more kids. I don't think anybody's going to debate that and what we've seen coming out of COVID, although we're just in our first year out of COVID. But I guess what I'm trying to tell you is, the previous board, previous administration, the 3 years that I've been here and the boards I've got to work with have put us in a really good position to increase, and even if we make a mistake, we've got balances to cover that. But yet, the conservative nature, I'm still not going to put in there that we're going to grow 150 or 200 kids, because I just don't know. We're just in a really good position. Next slide, please. Okay, capital expenditure schedule. This comes essentially right out of Dr. Way's facility plan. The Bell entry and transportation drive, you're seeing some of that work right now because he has to schedule it quickly. Replacing exterior doors at West at a cost of $66,000, and replacing the fire alarm. That's the big money amounts. And Dr. Way, give me a wild guess of what you got in that Bell entry and transportation.
So probably about 15 in fencing, another 10 or 12 with the culvert and the rock and stuff. And then we possibly could do a parking lot to get that parking out of the zone and relieve some area, because we anticipate we might need more area for buses sooner than later, and that pen's kind of tight in there. So that could be an additional $50,000, but that work isn't being done right now. We're really focused on the road and fencing right now.
So another little place we're being conservative, you'll see the asterisk. I don't reference anything in that asterisk, but that the transportation formula is being funded 75% of allowable expenses. What he's doing over there is allowable expenses. We don't get that money in 1 year, but it's prorated over several years, and so it'll go on a depreciation schedule. So if we're going to do anything to our transportation facility, we need to do it now and optimize the funding that's available right now. I can't promise that that's even going to be there for FY25, but let's do it now. And keep in mind, this is all in the $250,000 that we know we spend on facility, out of the facility plan annually. So Dr. Wade, we asked for a 20% increase this year. He didn't get it. It's $250,000 year in, year out, and eventually he'll get 3%. Next slide, maybe. Now, notice this, and this will be a little, you saw this slide last year. This means this is not in the budget. This means if approved in August, this would go in from our reserves. Okay, so my goal every year, Fund 4, all funds, is to make a revenue expenditure neutral budget. That doesn't mean to the penny, and my magic number right now is about 200,000. I will probably bring you a black budget, but even if it was red 200,000, it wouldn't concern me too much, because guys, that's a shift in the wind, and it can move $200,000. But if everything mapped out just as we write the budget, we would need to come up with another $250,000 if this were approved. And it's needed, and I'll let Dr. Way speak to the first one in just a minute. So do you understand what I mean by reserve capital? This is like year in, year out, you build your home budget potentially on the money that you're going to bring in, on your salary, maybe your spouse's salary. But you've also got a savings account. We need to dip in the savings account for this. The van, why is that up there again? Because I couldn't get Dr. Way to pull the trigger on one. That's what it amounts to. You knew what happened with car prices. I think we got approved last year for $40,000 or $50,000, and we just didn't pull the trigger. There is a very specific van we're looking for between availability and between pricing. He just wouldn't do it. So he may be as fiscally conservative as I am.
No, let me go. And then on top of that, we talked with Echo Ride last year because we had this problem last year. So this year they actually helped us out and purchased like a minivan. And so for some of our smaller groups, maybe it's a leadership team, they've been able to use that when they're not using it for routes, because we do have 1 or 2 kiddos that go on a separate route and they use that. So we've kind of pieced together some things this year. But we think,
and then that's why we took that big bus down to Express Scripts?
That's the point I'm making to him, is it still ain't enough. And so don't talk about that, Mr. Jones. I don't like to talk about the inefficiencies of public ed. But yes, it is very frustrating for our patrons to take a 55-passenger bus to take half a dozen kids, or a dozen kids even, to anywhere. So this will give us a lot more versatility, and we'll pull the trigger on it this time if the board were to approve it, and if I propose it. I think it's likely I will. Dr. Way, you're much more familiar with the cooling tower need.
cooling towers. So we have 3 cooling towers in our district. We have 1 at the high school, 1 at East, and 1 at middle school. Usually a cooling tower is about 15 to 20 years lifespan. Our cooling towers get PM twice a year, preventive maintenance twice a year with cleaning, usually right after the season, so usually in October when our AC is turned off, and then usually we kick it up in March or April. This year was April because we had kind of a cooler spring, and so we could do it a little later. Once we, and we do all sorts of band-aiding and fixing and stuff. In our April PM, they called me over there, and so I looked through everything, and so we have a lot of issues with our middle school. It's one of our oldest, and it's close to the end of life, and so we started looking at, okay, what can we do, because you can refurbish them sometimes, or you can get a new one. Refurbishing is not that much. It might save us 20 or 30,000. It's kind of like refurbishing an engine or rebuild an engine. Sometimes it's better to go new. The problem with cooling towers is if our cooling tower goes down, then we're out of AC in that building, the entire building. And so what you do at that point is you basically get a chiller, and it looks like a semi-trailer kind of, and you back it up to the back of the building. It costs about $20,000 to install the chiller, and then we would rent it out for about $10,000 to $15,000 a month to get us through. But we're getting very close to the end of the life on this cooling tower. The ideal situation is that you wait, we're going to try to get through the summer, and then in October, when we don't have any AC needs, that's when we do the swap out of the cooling tower. And so we estimate that cost to be anywhere from $180 to $200 when it's all said and done.
So again, not in the budget as it's written currently, likely to be recommended and later this
And
month.
that wasn't in our facility plan either.
So I'm just gonna
Probably,
ask
yeah.
a really
Yes.
dumb question.
No,
So the cooling tower is part of our HVAC system? Okay.
It cools down the entire middle school. It's one system. So if that goes down,
So
then we
like
don't
it
have any.
compares into like your home air conditioning?
Yeah, it's like on that level. If you know, like mini splits are the new thing right now, so you can get a mini split where you can zone different parts of your building and stuff.
Okay.
And so we do have, like West has that kind of.
and now, Aaron, now that you're familiar at any level, next time you go to the high school, you'll see the cooling tower by the gym now. Now you'll know what it is.
I bet I won't,
Well,
but
we'll see.
I appreciate your optimism.
Next slide, please. Timeline, and this is old news for you guys, August 2023, Wright City High School 2024. Again, their substantial completion is projected for earlier than that. If they hit their substantial completion, we plan to occupy at some level starting in January. But what I want to, and you'll hear me saying this in the early part of this year, of FY24, if we are so fortunate that we are in a school right now. We're not so pressed that, so in other words, what I'm saying, I'm not saying with information that I don't have. I'm very optimistic that they're going to hit substantial completion in October, November, whatever, up to a point where we can get in January. That is not right.
25, right?
I apologize. Yeah, I'm sorry. I looked at it again to make the change right now. She'll make it right.
It is aggressive.
I apologize. Sorry. Is my August of 23 right? Okay, so January of 25, I'm sorry. So I'm optimistic that we'll get in there, and be able to occupy it. But if we don't, it is not catastrophic. It is just something I'd really like to do for our kids. Now, I was talking to another superintendent in another district, and he said that their kids wanted to be the last group in that school. So we may talk to our kids and see what the vibe is, but our plan, we never let kids make the decision, we take their input. Our plan is to be in 25. Change the slide. Oh, okay, change the slide. All right, just change the slide. We'll just get it out of the board's vision. This is something that Mr. Mikas has kind of been wanting to look at. So if you looked in and it's going to be a lot to consume now, so you can take a look at this, but this will be presented to you monthly or bi-monthly or frequently throughout the year. But if you looked in our budget, our construction projects are really just 4 budget lines. Is it 4? 4-ish, let's say. And what Dave and our Mr. Mike's and I's conversation is, hey Chris, a little breakdown on that. And I would verbally give him a little breakdown on where we're at. So what we've done here is try to break this down for you and keep a running total on it for you so you can kind of monitor that. So I know when we had a change order, Mr. Mikas, and it was a big change order, had some concerns about that. his concerns, my concern level wasn't at that. Change orders happen, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for unforeseen bad reasons, but we're pretty comfortable, we're in good shape, particularly with our Fund 4 reserves where they're at now. But as you can see here, you're looking at the budgeted amount that we have for each category. So this is a subtotal for the new Wright City High School, made up of the pay apps that come in that you see every month. And then Veronica's got a balance over here, or an over and under. Architect and engineering fees, and a balance. Contingency. So keep in mind, we were rolling with about $5 million contingency. Help me. Okay, yeah. And so we're in great shape. I'm a little lost on that. Why am I saying 5 million? I'm not. I should be saying 3 million. I'm sorry. 3 million. She should have brushed me up on that better. No, I'm sorry. My bad. So you can see we're dipped into that, but that's also balanced with any credits we get now, keep in mind. So you might go, wait a minute, we've had change orders to exceed that. That's balanced to the credits. Soft cost, that's kind of everything else. Sometimes it can be unforeseen costs, but we try to obviously see those costs, but it can be an unforeseen cost. But soft costs associated with the project. And then you go down to the alternates. And of course, we haven't got into some of that part of the project, but the alternates, and then the East Ad, a different contract, a different contractor down here. Again, the subtotals and the total right here at on this blue line that I thought was blue. It's kind of purpley. Renovation is part of the second bid package for the renovation of the existing high school and the renovation of the administrative offices. So again, may need to digest that a little bit, and certainly if there's feedback that you want to give us and something that would change on that to make look a little more simple, or maybe it's more detailed, we can do whatever you wish. But I think that'll be a nice dashboard for you to look at, like I said, whether it be monthly, every other month, or whatever the board wishes, to kind of keep monitoring the project.
I mean, the only thing I would see in the future, like what we do at work, is like you have your total budget, the amount spent, the amount left, and the percent spent.
Okay.
But, I mean, what you got there is good, and I appreciate that. But
Well,
I can do the math myself.
Where I stumbled, I guess what I'm looking at here, where I got myself a little confused, I apologize. So keep in mind, we have about $3 million in contingency, but remember, we're hopeful not to spend that contingency. And where will that contingency go if we don't spend it? It goes to furniture. Our margin was pretty narrow on this project, and we knew that we couldn't put $3 million out there just for furniture. We were going to need that as the contingency, but if it goes untapped, all that money, in fact, he's going to make a draw on it for the 4-room ad for the furniture of East 4-room ad, because it'll be completing, of course, in August of 23. So we'll be pulling some of that contingency. It is a contingency. It's not a contingency in the contract. It's our contingency, and we'll use a little bit of that for the 4-room ad at East, and then hopefully the project closes on the new high school, and we have a large portion of that contingency left that we can buy new furniture.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Heidi, you've been quiet. Do you have any questions?
No, I just pulled myself off mute, and I just wanted to say I really appreciate this work. I hate to say it because it's extra effort, but I think it's super important. I would love to see this monthly. Just that information. That's all I had to say. Sorry.
You're good. Thank you for your input.
And the only thing I'll say to that is thank Veronica. We knew that was needed primarily from Mr. Mikes, but I know the board would be asking questions, so we thought this was going to be a good tool. But I asked her to put it together, and she did a great job with it. So.
Thank you, Veronica.
And actually, this is just resources available. You've seen that slide, so I'm not going to go over that unless the board needs me to. So provide me feedback on that if you wish for a little change. And that doesn't mean, whether that be going into July or after that. Next slide, please. We're close, guys. So then you come into where does it wrap up? If the budget ends the way we wrote it, and when it's approved in June, if the budget came out perfect, and it will not. It will not. Nobody's budget is going to be, it's a working document throughout the year. We have 3 formal revisions. Every month it changes, okay? But if it did, where would we land? Right at about 32% reserves. And our Fund 4 balances, would end at 9.7. FY '24 would end, we would still not be done with the high school, we just have $1.5, $3 million of pay apps per the draw schedule is what we anticipate. The balance of that would be unrestricted money. So we're landing in really good shape. We don't talk a lot about Fund 3 because it, like I said, takes care of itself essentially. We deal with it when we pass the tax rate. We deal with it whenever we send stuff off to the state auditor's office. Next slide. Thank goodness. Okay. I'll take any questions you have on the budget.
Heidi, any additional questions from you?
Not at the moment, sir, thank you.
Aaron?
I'm just wondering, I know that there's staffing is included in here, but what out of our CSIP and goals in the CSIP are, that do we need to bring out? Just notice in the budget, like if any of those things, what's being funded in the budget that's a priority in the CSIP.
I'm going to kind of refer to Elizabeth because I'm not near my notebook. If you can make me a note on that, that's a great point. I will tell you, I don't think there's anything in there with a huge fiscal note. It would come out of his, and I'm very familiar with his. There's some stuff that is minimal. And so, but that's a great point. It's a great point. So, but we'll make sure it has a fiscal note when we bring the CSIP around and kind of detail if this is going to cost extra that's going to have a budget impact.
Okay.
That's a good catch, really good catch.
Anything else, Aaron?
No, thank you.
Mary, anything else?
No, there was something back further that I'll come up with it and I'll ask it later.
You bet.
Minus the construction cost, what is the budget? Is it $21 million budget? Is it a $15 million
Oh,
budget?
our total budget, 24?
It's pushing 25.
Yeah, with debt service. Yeah. And the one that, go back one slide, Pat,
Yeah.
Mr. Micus back on the slide, or back, I'll pat you on the back, Mr. Micus. He already knows this, so I'm pointing it out again, but he asked a great question when we, I don't know, when we approved the audit or something, but was, hey, where's the lease purchase money? He did the numbers, and remember, Connie didn't believe it, I didn't believe it, I ran it down, Connie didn't believe it, she ran it down, but we're not real experienced with lease purchase dollars. They don't hit our books. They are sitting in US Bank. We see them. Oh yeah, we've got them invested now for our short-term investments. We see them, we monitor them, but we have not spent any of our lease purchase money yet. We're going to exhaust our general obligation, but that money is not there. So lease purchase stays off of your ASBR, maybe talk a little out of turn, Veronica, out of the ASBR, out of the audit, I'm not sure, but certainly out of our budget projection information. Weird, another little nuance of public school finance. So right now we have approximately, and I know Veronica's going to say, no, that's not right, because we've earned some interest on that, but about $8.5 million out there, and it may be whatever it is, 9.2 or something like that now.
Anything else, Dave?
No.
So, so we saw on slides 29 and 30, the major capital improvement projects that are planned for next year. Do I remember correctly that we're working on an updated master plan throughout the summer, and we'll get that about September?
I hope so. I really do, and I know Jen is going to help inform that. And just, I think, and Beth, I think you and I talked about this, but it was a little bit light. Make the distinction between Dr. Way's facility plan, which is very common in any school district. It'd be common in our EMO school districts. And the difference between that, and they can be used interchangeably, and a master plan. But a master plan is much more global, and also for districts more, you'll see them always, usually on a district's website, the districts that are experiencing growth. You know,
Okay.
so, because you need a tiger plan, and we just had not had one developed.
Yeah, okay. So, but that master plan will include building improvement projects forecasted out over the next 10 years?
Available funds forecasted out. I'm meeting with Stiefel in July to kind of get new projections for that, on what money for no tax increase availability will be in the future, and potentially even something that can maybe beaten Jenna to punch a little bit, maybe the land acquisition.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So you said 10 years. Typically, they're 5 years.
5 years.
So, I mean, is that gonna be an issue if it's 5 versus 10?
No, I just threw 10 out there.
Okay.
And I'll say they are all over the place. I would, you know, I would think ours will be forecasted out there a little farther. There'll be some pieces of it that'll be in the first 5 years, but we'll have a
So I
little.
always thought we did a rolling 5 years. Because, you know, that way we kind of,
And
we
see-
did a 5-year,
Yeah.
and then he would, you know, check some items off.
But that was on the facilities plan, right? They
Yeah.
did a 5 years facility plan, wasn't it also?
Yeah.
Yeah, two things cycle of 5 year.
Construction plan is bigger than 5 years. Facilities, 5 years. Construction plan, that makes sense.
All right.
And the other thing that you're potentially is another strategic plan that oftentimes, particularly rural small schools, they're continuous, not comprehensive now, it's been changed, continuous school improvement plan, oftentimes has a facility component to it in smaller districts because they're not building, they're not forecasting out, they're basically merging their facility plan into their continuous improvement plan. Ours does not have that because we feel like we're a little past that. Now we're gonna need the maintenance plan, the 5-year plan, and we're gonna need this master plan that may reach out there. Jenna, I'm gonna make a guess, just agree with me, and then you can tell me I'm wrong after the board's gone. 20 years?
Yeah.
Anywhere from 10 to 20 years is what I
At
would
least
say.
10,
Yeah, at least 10.
typically.
Yeah, but she did just correct me very tactfully. didn't she? Very, very good.
She was nodding while she did
Yes,
it.
yeah, that was nice, okay.
You got any other questions, Beth?
Yeah.
I have no other questions.
I have another question.
Go for it.
Sorry. So we talked about our insurance costs going up, and I realized that we've been, you know, pretty fortunate in the last couple of years. I'm just curious, do we have, through our broker or anything, like a wellness program that we're able to take advantage of that helps reduce those catastrophic costs?
We do have
Yeah,
bonus,
okay, great.
We're on like a 3-year rolling, is that how you guys are? We're 3 years.
We,
And so,
I'm sorry, yeah.
yeah, we had one of our best years roll off and one of our not so
Well,
good years.
So the best year rolling off was the cost to claims ratio.
Right.
I think what you're talking about is you have very little you can do, arguably maybe, of what you can do to suppress premiums. One is we got to keep people healthy, right?
Right.
And so it can also be early intervention, like, you know, in the analysis of a consortium looking at that, you say, my gosh, if we spend, you know, depending on the size of the consortium, $100,000 for everybody to get a wellness check. How much does that save us? Because Aaron had an issue that was going to be catastrophic and be
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars. So actually, we have the winner of our most recent wellness effort, I think. No, we don't have the winner. I think she was like second or third. She was second of our last one. You know, so one of the low-hanging fruits of those type of efforts is a weight loss challenge, and we just had that. And so, and Veronica has been walking every lunch period and actually was staying. Hopefully she didn't chew on me for talking about that. I know I got one coming from Beth. I now have one coming from Veronica too.
Okay,
So-
yeah, I was just wondering if there was something in place that would,
We do. I will say, you know, I don't think ours is real vibrant or vigorous, but I do think since I've been here, Glenn did more with it this year, but we're kind of post-COVID and getting back to normal.
and does our, the broker or Ed Plus, the consortium or anything help to
They do.
fund that?
Every consortium, because they don't want premiums to go up either.
Right, right.
They want to make their money on what's current and then maybe scam us some other way. But yeah, so they usually coordinate or have it kind of frameworked out. Our wellness director, which is Glenn, our wellness director by title too. And so then Glenn kind of can modify that and do a lot or a little. And I'd say ours, like I said, is not real vibrant, but maybe as we get another ball out of the air moving forward, we can commit a little more focus to that.
Thank you. That's it now.
Any final questions from anybody? Okay.
Mr. Jones, if I may have the last word, remember, please, and that goes for, you know, anybody that you talk to too, whatever questions you have that come from that, do not hesitate, of course, to call me, set an appointment, email me or whatever, and we'll drill down as deeply as you want to. So the discussion never has to stop at the board meeting, it just has to stop as a board. So please reach out to me individually and we'll answer your questions or get those answers, find somebody who can answer them. So thank you very much.
Okay, next time on the agenda, RSP enrollment analysis. Dr. Birch, I'll let you kick it off and then.
Yeah, Jen is here, Jenna Wallace, and I think I'm pronouncing her name right. She's presented this to Dr. Way and I, and we're very pleased with the presentation, so I'll just turn the floor over to her and she'll present this report that will definitely inform our master plan.
Perfect. And I'll just kind of let you click for me. So this is a report where we're going to go through your enrollment analysis. So we're going to really dive in deep to enrollment trends, but keep it more high level than what Superintendent just went through. So I'll try to keep to main signature slides, what's the most important information, and then really diving deep into what are the projections and where do we have enrollment going over the next 5 years.
Okay, 1 second. Heidi, can you hear her?
Yes, I can, thank you.
All right.
Perfect, okay. I kind of have a soft voice, so if you guys can't ever hear me, and that goes for questions too. We can keep this pretty informal, so if there's any slide you guys have questions on, I can dig deeper in. Feel free to stop me and answer those. As well as if I don't know the answer, I can come back with our team and take that note and get back with you guys. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So RSP & Associates, that's my firm. We're based out of Kansas City, and we are a long-range planning firm solely for school districts. So we just work with school districts all over the Midwest to do long-range planning. And it always starts with this piece here of enrollment analysis. So what's the projections, what's the student data, and then we lead into some of those bigger projects. So potentially boundaries, facility master plans, capacity audits, all sorts of things, but it always starts here with enrollment analysis. In the area, we've been working with Lincoln County, our 2 school districts, so Troy. We've done their enrollment analysis annually every year for I think the last 20 years. And we just finished up a boundary process with them last month, as well as Orchard Farm, and then a lot more in the Missouri area. So you can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so our report tonight is going to be broken out into these different 5 parts. I'll spend a little bit of time on part 1, enrollment and demographics. So what are your student data trends? What's the community demographics? Part 2 is development and our economic growth. So housing development, economic development, those are going to be the main drivers leading into your projections. And that's what we'll spend most of our time on part 3. I'll give you a couple next step items of what to do with this information. We're more than just a demographer firm where we give you data dumping and we leave. We're going to give you the next steps of how to use this data and hopefully better inform you guys to make those decisions. And there's a lot of stuff in the appendix, so if you guys are very riveted with my presentation, you can even go into the appendix, but I won't spend much time there. Anytime you guys see our star symbol, signature slide, that's going to be the most important variables leading into the analysis. So every district is unique, so we're going to process all the data, but there's different indicators in every district that lead more and are more important to your student body, and we'll represent that with that star. Okay, so go ahead to the next slide. 100,000 foot perspective here, so kind of a teaser slide of what I'm going to go through. So we have the district forecasted growth over the next 5 years of about 400 students. The majority of that at the elementary level. So with the new residential growth, we're seeing that expected forecast highest at elementary, and as cohorts move forward, middle school and high school also growing. We've taken capacity as the district provided that and put that into the forecast, and we have some capacity challenges. We kind of teased that earlier of at our elementary buildings having where enrollment growth exceeds our building capacity over the next 5 years. And then lastly, residential development and our forecasted economic boom with AFG. Those are going to be the main drivers leading into this forecast. So next slide. This report, there's a lot to this, and we have a lot of different maps. So we have a great GIS team at the firm, so we have a lot of maps, a lot of student analysis in this, and we always start here with just a district boundary map so you guys kind of get a familiar feel of our map. So kind of a 2-point here where we're zoomed into Wright City, and then full district boundary view here. So you can go into the next slide. All right, so planning areas. This is going to be our RSP methodology. So a planning area is a individual geographic unit that we create in-house that's based off of all of your local data. So subdivision lines, highways, major infrastructure, where schools are located, If it's a mobile home park versus a new single-family development, goes into our planning areas. So if you follow one green line, that indicates one individual planning area, which is then statistically analyzed. We know that there's different amount of students depending on where you live. If you're in Innsbruck, if you're in Wright City, there's a different yield for the number of students. So that's how we get into this planning area. So if you go to the next slide, each planning area is then put into our forecasting model. So instead of just saying, looking at your entire district, this is the amount of students, we're saying in each neighborhood, in each planning area, this is the forecasted amount of students analyzed with all these different variables. I go through that briefly just to go through, this is statistics. This is all the data that we're looking at, and we're pushing it into this model. And by breaking it out in all those small pieces, we can say of the likelihood of a new development versus an old development has a different amount of students that we're going to see over the next 5 years. All right, so you can go into next slide. All right, so first signature slide here, our live birth data. So we're looking at the relationship with Warren County live birth data and the number of kindergarten students 5 years later. So it's not a complete apples to oranges. We know that some people move into the district when they have 3-year-olds, and you may be born in a month. That doesn't necessarily mean if you're a kindergarten 1 year or if they hold you back. So it's not complete, but it does kind of give a picture of that relationship of your Warren County live births versus 5 years later kindergarten class. So overall, very stable live births, around 430 births per year, which honestly, since COVID, we've seen live births tank in most counties and statewide. I think a lot of people assumed it would go up, but it has not. And so this having a pretty stable of just 3-year average of 1 less live birth is very good and bodes well for the community to continue seeing a growth in our kindergarten class. So you guys enroll. If you look at this, there was a low of only about 19% of the live births that year, and we're up to 30%. So as live births increase, your also share of your live births in your county has been increasing. So more people moving into the community and more children enrolling in the system.
Quick question.
Yes.
Lincoln County,
Mhm.
how does it skew these numbers or not skew these numbers in terms of a big picture?
Yeah, so I have the same chart down in the appendix that we kind of pieced that together. It's a much smaller percent of the number of live births in Lincoln County to the number of kindergartens you see there. So most of those students are enrolling in Lincoln County.
So basically, that it's not a material impact to our district.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
All right, so past enrollment by grade. So this is looking at our different cohorts throughout the grades all the way back to 2000 to where we're at in 22-23. So a couple of these main takeaways pulling out of it. We're at our highest enrollment ever this year with over 1,700 kids. PK-12, 1,674 of our K-12. Our largest classes in our 10th grade, our smallest classes in our senior grade. So some of the quick rule of thumb that we always try to pull is looking at what was your senior class last year versus your incoming kindergarten class. We can see here that last year we had graduating 73 students and coming in 138 kindergarten students. So off the bat like that, that is an indicator of growth. You're replacing fully and then more so students that organically exit the system each year. The other thing of looking at is just where our cohorts are and where our largest classes are. So our smallest classes being 11th and 12th grade, as they exit, they're automatically going to be increasing at the high school level as the larger classes make their way in.
So I have another question, if you don't mind.
No?
So, one of the things that you said earlier, and I made a comment to him, was it seems like we start out big in the elementaries, and then as we move that cohort, we lose some. And that seems to be like a trend that I saw in this data perpetually is start big, and then as we move through elementary, middle, and high school, kids move out or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, do you see that? So that of that 138, by the time they get to be seniors in high school, what do we think that's gonna, how many of those kids are actually gonna graduate?
Yeah. If you flip to the next slide, this next slide gets right at that, which is cohort change. So looking at as a class of 7th grade becomes 8th grade, what's the propensity of them increasing or decreasing? So red numbers are where you typically see student loss between the years, and black being higher. So what you're saying, especially at that, let's look at high school level, on 3-year average, you guys see a loss from each year. So 9th to 10th to 11th, you typically see student classes, maybe they graduate early, or dropouts, things like that, or kind of, you could do class recovery, so maybe they stay an additional year as 10th grade. That would also contribute to a cohort loss. But you do see that at the high school level, but there's also some areas of increase. So from 8th to 9th grade, there's a cohort increase. So maybe students that are private parochial homeschool that want to come into your high school experience, we have that statistical correlation of a boost initially at high school, but then a drop off. But overall, pretty stable of our cohort changes. You can kind of see how that's pieced together throughout time. So like I was saying, 8th to 9th is your biggest cohort increase, but then 10th to 11th is your greatest loss. Does that answer those questions?
Yeah, it does, because obviously, you know, I mean, to your point about, you know, or eventually you're gonna get to it, I read it, but, you know, we're talking about what's our next thing to do. You know, I mean, maybe it's not put phase 2 at the high school, it's elementary buildings or something like that, because, I mean, at the end of the day, that's where, you know, so maybe phase 2 in the high school, it doesn't happen for a while because we're, you know, dealing with elementary space and stuff like that.
Yep, correct. All right, so the next slide. All right, so this is looking at migration. So really trying to focus on what is the movement of new students versus past students in the district. So orange bars in migration is I'm a new student into the district. Last year I was somewhere else, state, private, parochial, anything like that. And it's going to be 1st through 12th graders that are new. So this doesn't account for like kindergarten. That's not a new student per se for migration. That's just a kindergarten. This is 1st through 12th that they've transferred in. Out migration is that opposite. I was a student last year, and this year I transferred to Lincoln County, I went homeschool, anything like that, and I exited the district. So this relationship here, 2021 pandemic year, you guys had an out migration. So there was more out migration than in migration. But the last 2 years, we've seen more in migration than out migration. I think it's a better takeaway really here is that this year, 22-23, it was a loss of 153 and a gain of 154, which on both ends is a smaller number. So the transiency that we saw during the pandemic years, it was very likely that people were making choices where they want to send their students is dropping off, and more stable of our migration of students.
Jen, may I clarify something?
Mhm.
So if that sounds counter to what I said earlier, remember, and I perhaps make a mistake in doing this, but whenever I say ADA, I usually oftentimes say noses, you know, because I think that's a little more simple for the district or for the board to understand. When she's seeing that growth, which isn't much growth, but a little bit of growth, remember, we're paid on ADA. And even though the kids have come back, they're not coming to school, because we know we have struggled with attendance. So the margin's pretty small, they're just in 26-1, but that's not a different message, it's just that I was saying, we're not growing kids, maybe growing kids, but we're not growing ADA. This current fiscal year is the first year that we will have the same ADA as pre-pandemic. Does that make sense? It's not a kid you get paid on, it's not membership, it's ADA.
And all our data is looking at official count day data. So we're looking at that total enrollment, that
Membership.
static number, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so go ahead to the next slide. Couple of visuals here. So student count change map. This goes into that planning area level. Over the last 5 years, where have we seen student growth versus student loss on the individual level? So green is going to be a slight decrease, orange is a slight increase. So we can see these couple of areas that are orange with our new developments coming in, where we've seen student count increase over the last 5 years. Next slide. Student heat map. So this goes into our proximity of students. So as they're geocoded in the system, their official address, what is the relationship of where they're located in regard to other students? So hotter the red, more students. So our 2 pockets of really high density right here, right near the 2 mobile home parks, around Wright City, where that's going to be the areas of our hottest student density in the district. And then go ahead to the next slide. All right, so that kind of goes through part one. Any questions on this part, or really those main themes of enrollment growth continuing to grow? We have some of our largest grades ever in history this year, and as those cohort forward, they tend to increase and then maybe drop off at the high school, but at our elementary and middle school to continue to increase. I kind of saw hands, Jim.
No, I think Dave.
I gotta
Oh, okay.
sneak out, I'm sorry, apologize.
It's okay, I'll take it personally, but.
Coach
it's
a
all right.
baseball game tonight, thank you.
Good luck.
Yep.
All right, so we can go ahead into part two. And then, yeah. All right, so part two, we're going to talk about total population development, and then what does that mean for our student enrollment, which is why we always start with this graphic here, is a correlation graphic, trying to pinpoint ourselves on the relationship between these three variables. So this green line at the top is our census data. So from the US Census, what's our total population been doing over these last 10 years? And you guys have consistent growth into the district, a small dip in 21-22, and that's normally seen when a new census, decennial census comes out. They kind of offset themselves a little bit. But overall population growth, our blue line here is new building activity, so certificates of occupancy. We can see that after 17-18, you guys had a lot more building activity, and now we're averaging around 200 to 300 new homes a year in this part. And then our last, this red line that's a bit more squiggly, that's going to be our enrollment growth. So we can see generally as these two indicators increase, they also tend to increase our enrollment growth. The dip here, that's going to be our pandemic year, so something we couldn't account for about enrollment growth. Next slide. All right, so student yield rate. This is analysis we put together that takes a look at all of the housing type in the district and the number of students that currently live in those homes, and looking at what is the yield rate of the number of 100 residential units to actually having students in the building. So if we look at over time, what we're showing here, that we have this broken down between single family and multifamily. So single family, you're kind of typical, one person lives there, they own the home, single family home. Multifamily is going to be all the rest of that housing type. So if it's a townhome, if it's a duplex, mobile home park, apartment complex, all of that falls into multifamily. Overall in the district, you guys see around 14 students per 100 single family homes and 21 students per 100 multifamily homes. Right, so and then the other kind of main takeaway is over time, you can see that your single family yield rate has been decreasing while your multifamily yield rate has been increasing. So as expansion of new units and affordability of, say, single family increases, the multifamily tends to yield more students. So when this is really important when you guys have a lot of development, what you guys do, when you have expansion projects of a apartment complex versus large scale single family, it'll have a different relationship with the actual number of students you guys can expect. I see some furrowed brow, so does this make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
If you're referring to my program.
Well, my takeaway on it is, and you also look at wealth too, because if you got
Right.
a lot of mobile homes, that's indicative of, average income is not what a single family is too. So that right there, for me, tells me that's where our free and reduced is so much higher.
Mine was because we know there's an apartment complex.
Oh yeah, you see it going up right across the street.
Being built.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, we went like to that heat map, how I said those two pockets of the highest student density are in our mobile home parks. So there's that high relationship between what's affordable housing in your community, having families and having students in the system. If you go ahead to the next couple of maps here that really speak to that. So we're trying to pinpoint visually what is the housing quality in the district. So average year built, so on that planning area level, red being the newest units in the district, blue being the oldest. So you guys know, it's kind of fun to like pinpoint, pick an area that's a red, and then you can follow this throughout the map. So this this is average year built. You can go into median home value. You go to the next slide. So this is going to be our price point. So red being the least affordable, so most expensive houses, versus blue, which is going to be the most affordable. So you can kind of see on if the new housing coming in, on what scale was that average median home value of that. And then last slide is our recent year built. So this is a dot map. We're really trying to capture where the clusters, the last 5 years units have been built. And you can see how these pockets pop up of these new subdivisions in each year. So 2022, a slight dip in our number of units, but we know that there was a lot of just interest rates and building and supply chain challenges that kind of slowed down building a little bit, but overall still positive growth of our building activity these past 2 years. So at that point, you can go to the next slide. But yeah, so this one last slide here. So we're looking at kind of a cool graphic just to look at decade by decade the amount of growth and how you guys have exploded kind of the last 20 years. So the yellow bars being the number of existing units in each decade, with the blue on top being the number of new units in each decade. So kind of 500 new units, 500 new units. Starting in 2000, we're at plus 1,000 units in each new decade. And then we're already looking here, 2020 to 2023 at 500 new units. So you think of we built as much in these 3 years as what you built in the 80s, practically, okay? All right, so next slide is how I go into what are we looking at for our potential growth over this next 10 years. So this visual here is looking at all areas that RSP identified by talking with city planners, doing district tours, meeting with the county, as well as other just like local builders in the area to try to identify what their idea is for timing and what can actually be a project we want to put into that would be a student yielding project. So green areas is where we have current development happening. So either dirt's moving, infrastructure is being put in, current stages. Yellow is more on a 5-year timeline, so they may be phase 3 and 4 of a project that's currently being working on, or they're waiting on new road connectivity, sewer, lift station, that sort of stuff. And then last, 10-year, that is even farther out there, so something just to kind of keep our eyes on if that ever pops up. We also highlighted where this new high school is. You can kind of see we have our cohorts of growth here, here, and here, right? So right around where the facilities are being located. And then I think ASG's been on all of our maps. You may have that feel of where that is at well. Okay, so go ahead to the next slide. So this goes into all the information that was on that map, what is the projects associated, and what are our potential units. So overall, over these next 10 years, we have around 2,600 units being potentially built in the district. In current stages, about 1,100. In our 5-year, 1,400. So if you think back of why we provide that yield rate of the number of students per 100 homes. And that's why we also provide this type of development. So some multifamily potential, but most of it's single family. So hopefully seeing that single family yield rate increase as these new units come online, as the housing type expands there. All right, next slide. So I'm sure you guys are very familiar, but we just want to make sure everyone looking at this online also knows that we are aware. We have AFG expanding, so adding jobs, 1,300 local jobs to the community and where that's located, with the wastewater treatment plant being put in next door to expand that economic drive there. And then next slide. All right, any questions on any of this information of where we think the project scope is going and that relationship of students and housing type?
Tell me again what our yield rate is.
I think it was 21 for multifamily and 14 for single family.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then we can go ahead into the next slide and then one more. Okay, so I did want to just pull this out right before. So we have the new high school opening. and we'll talk about that. So all of our projections are going to be showing that new high school capacity. Phase 1 of the 700, phase 2, 1,100, and then the TBD on our current high school. All right, so first visual here for our projections, we have where the district has been and where we have you guys projected going over these next 5 years. So overall growth at each level, with elementary having the most of growth. By 27-28, we have the district increasing over 2,000 students. The elementary level, 1,050 students. Middle school, 425. And high school, 599. You can see this kind of percents down here in the bullet points, but an overall around a 3% to a 6% growth each year over these next 5 years. All right, you can go ahead to the next slide, and I'll talk about all this in the next slide. All right, so that was kind of your overview of the grade configuration by projections, and what we do here is pull out by each building. So what we're showing here is the last 3 years of past enrollment, and then the next 5 years of by building. And what we can do in our past enrollment is we provide the breakdown of where students reside. And this is helpful for, in a lot of states right now, we're seeing policy changes with out of district and kind of stuff, so we wanted to give that context. So in this case, if we're looking at East, there are 7 students that reside out of the district that attend East, and then 252 that reside and attend, that total to 259 that are currently served in the building for district enrollment.
I'm assuming those 7 out of district are teachers bringing their kids in.
That would be my assumption
Yeah.
too. I was actually about to write the note. Yeah.
I don't recall that many waiver requests.
No. So that's the only way they could be.
And this is also just more so when we're looking at the geography of how I had all those maps of those students. There are some of those students that fall outside the map, so we want to make sure they're captured so that these numbers total up. So we have that provided for past enrollment, but looking forward, you'll see these green numbers of where we're going to 27, 28. The orange shading you see is signaling when enrollment is projected over the building capacity. Okay, so building capacity here provided by the district, so 400 at East and West, 550. And that 400 does include the 4 rooms, I believe. Is that right, Jeremy? Yeah. So the 400 has the 4 additional rooms and 550. So in this case, if we're keeping our grade configuration the same, a K1 building and a 2-5 building, West Elementary would see capacity challenges starting in 25-26 and ongoing the next 3 years, getting up to a 660 enrollment in a 550 building. If we take that into a higher level, just looking at both elementary schools equally, the K-5 enrollment, we are looking at capacity challenges starting at 26-27 and going over to 27-28. So about 1,000 kids in the next 5 years, with both buildings combined at 950 seats. Looking at middle school and high school, you guys are set over for these next 5 years, okay? So at our middle school capacity, getting up to around 425 in a 550 building. And then at the new high school, about 600 students in a 700 building. So adequate space to accommodate that growth at those 2 facilities. At the elementary school, some challenges. Any questions on this?
Did you say we have 950 seats between both elementaries?
Yes.
Do you know what the breakdown is there?
Yeah, so at East, there's 400 and then
Oh, I
550
missed
at
that one.
West.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we want to go to the next slide. All right, so last of our projections that we provide is this projections by grade. So this is a good tool for kind of district admin when you guys are looking at staffing. What is the individual grade levels projections over these next 5 years? You kind of see where the coloring stops. Our projections go forward of our different grade levels. We can see that some of these main takeaways of when we get out to 27, 28, that a lot of our classes are averaging above this 160 to 200 students per class number. So really increasing, where in this year, you're looking at about 150 average students, but that increasing over the next 5 years to near 200 students per class. With the smallest grades, as they cohort forward, looking at the high school, of around 140 students, versus if you think, right, that years 6 through 10, as they exit, they're going to be replaced by 160. So it's kind of a continued, just because we stop at 27, 28 doesn't mean the growth stops. That's just our 5-year projection here. Any questions on this? All right, so we can go ahead to the next slide. Just observations, conclusions here, where we can see the breakdown between our enrollment growths, and then our challenges really being an elementary solution over the next 5 years, and our high school and middle school set for the next 5 years. With those main themes really being, what's our class size right now? So we know we have larger elementary classes right now. As they move forward, they're going to continue to increase. We have development activity, like you were saying, the apartment complex across the street. So as those units get built, there are going to be new kids, new families, and we have kind of our migration trend. So more people moving in, live births, that percentage of live births increasing, and new jobs, all 3 indicators leading towards more migration into the community. All right, we can go to next steps. I kind of wanted to pause here and give you guys the space. If you need to ask me any questions for elementary, kind of put a couple questions or kind of thoughts to mull over of adjusting your elementary kind of solution here. So if we're looking at a consideration for our elementary buildings, going to 2 K-5 buildings would provide an additional year. So if you kind of think back to that slide where right now if it maintains the grade configuration, West sees capacity challenges while East does not. Versus if they were 2 K-5 buildings, you can kind of distribute that enrollment in a different way, versus if it's an addition at one of the elementary schools or even a 3rd elementary school. So all just different thoughts. We just wanted to
So
throw out
my issue is, if you go back to the heat map,
there.
you know, way back where all the kids are, you know, they're all in the western side of the district. Yeah, right, that's good. So they're all on the western side. Like, where is, on that document there, where is East Elementary? I can't see. Where would East Elementary be?
Right here.
Yeah, so the problem you're gonna have is, if you go to a 2 K-5, how would you draw your boundaries?
It would be way over here.
Yeah, and then the issue is, because
We had
Dr.
that problem
Gaines used to
before.
tell.
We had that problem a long time
Yeah,
ago when we talked about it.
and that's, you know, in 2008 when we built that East, you know, there was supposed to be a neighborhood there or whatever, that never materialized. And Dr. Gaines always told me that you draw the line once, parents go, okay, you know, we're good to go. But if you start moving it a lot, that's when they start getting mad at you, because, oh, my kid was going to East, you know, it's like, you know, that kind of thing happens. So how would you draw, I mean, I don't need an answer tonight, and obviously we're not going to get an answer, but, you know, I'd be very wary about how you would draw a line. And the other question is, what I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, but, you know, there's supposed to be neighborhoods over there by East. And were those orange or were those green?
There was the one that's right north is green, and then farther up there, phase kind of 3 and 4 is yellow on that 5-year.
And I forget what each color meant.
Yeah, so green is current, so we know that infrastructure is being put in, and then the next phase is on the 5-year timeline.
So at what point do you think we would get enough kids over there on the eastern side of the district to support a K-5 at?
I mean, that depends on the boundary
Yeah.
of how far you move to the west.
Yeah, because you see, to me, that's, I've never been able to crack that nut about where you put that boundary. And then at AFG, and you got Liberty, which is kind of down, you going south a little bit. I mean, you know, I don't know where we're at with that either, so.
We have only had preliminary discussions with Jenna, but that is the next phase of work that we've got to hammer out.
Yeah.
Also, this is just a comment. If when we get down that road to talking about boundaries, and I've shared this with Dr. Berger and probably anybody else who would listen, my biggest concern with splitting our elementaries is the making sure that each elementary's economic base is about the same as far as household income. I don't ever want to get to be in a situation where we have a building of have and have not. So if that is a thought on boundarying our elementaries, my biggest concern would be making sure that the income level is as even as we can get it between the two.
That, I would like to second Erin's concern. I know I've been quiet tonight, but that's super, super, super important. And I'm afraid, as far long as we are north and south, this is gonna be the toughest thing. I can't imagine. There's so many more concerns about than just capacity. But I second Erin's concerns.
Thank you, I appreciate you answering the question.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. We're doing boundary projects all over, and it's true, once you make the line, you don't want to change it. So if, I would say whatever this decision is, have the long-term plan, because if it's an addition on a building versus a third building, that's going to be another boundary adjustment. So having that long-term, which I know you guys are going that facility master plan, which is going to be perfect, and whatever that route is, keep that in mind. I'm going to go down, and I can really answer any other questions that you guys have.
It's not a real great question, and I hesitate to even ask it here because I know I could melt to you, but AFG is having such an impact on us, and it's hard to figure out exactly what the impact is. There's optimism, at least from my seat, that it's going to drive students, there's no doubt, but its proximity is also going to drive students that won't live in our district. It's going to have a regional effect. And you work with Winston and perhaps even Troy, is a little further, but Winston's in close proximity, obviously at the border, at Forsto. So whenever you're talking about this with the Winston Board of Education, is AFG a factor for that too?
Yes, their assumption that they're also going to grow from it, and we would say that as well. Economic drivers like this pull regionally. People are going to make choices of where they want to live. It's kind of those factors of drive time, affordability of the house.
School districts?
And school districts,
Yeah,
where they
absolutely.
pick their house and commute kind of whatever's reasonable to that individual person. So it is more of a regional, I wouldn't say all the 1,300 jobs are going to be in your district. You'll definitely see some, but surrounding districts will too.
How far reach is that? So is it a factor for Troy?
Not as much. I would say some people may think so.
Well, so my gut tells me housing's cheaper in Montgomery County. So I'm wondering if people are gonna be, if they'll be moving to Jonesburg or just a little west of Jonesburg in Middletown or whatever that is out there. You know where that is at. But I'm wondering if that's where some of these individuals will live because it's more affordable housing.
And
Yeah.
an easy commute.
And it's an easy commute to just come down 70 versus living in Wentzville. So I would imagine Warrenton would see some growth, and I'm wondering if Montgomery County's going to see some growth.
I could see that as well. We haven't worked with either of those districts, but I agree with you.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is great.
Were there any other slides you needed to go through with us?
I don't think so. I think if you just go to my last slide, up one. There we go. This is just our last slide where we just kind of show that as statistics, like we have different indicators that you want to watch, right? So in between reports, kind of keeping an annual check of that kindergarten versus senior class is a good rule of thumb, as well as what were your live births this year? Does that keep trending? You see a drastic drop of live births 1 year from last year, that's going to be something you want to look at. And building permits, so if the economic system takes a downturn and building permits cease, that's gonna be something you guys wanna watch. Or the flip side, like if they expand to 500 a year or something like that. So this last slide I think is important just to give you guys kind of a feel of in between enrollment analysis. You guys can kind of piece together what those projections could look like as well. And that's it, that's what I've got.
Any final questions for Jen? If we have any additional ones, we'll follow up with them.
Perfect.
Thank you
Sounds
very much
good.
for your
Thank
time.
you.
Great work, thank you.
Drive safe to wherever you're going.
I will.
Thank you.
All right, while she's cleaning up her stuff, we'll take a little break here, but in accordance with Provision 610.020 revised statute of the Board of Education, we're going to meet in closed session. We're going to discuss 610.3, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of particular employees by a public government body when personal information about the employee is discussed or recorded. 13, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees, applications for employment. 14, records which are protected from disclosure by law. Heidi, I'm assuming you're not going to stick around for this, because I don't think it's a, or are you? We'll have to get you.
No, I'm good. I will touch base tomorrow with whatever the decisions were made. Thank you.
All right. So I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call starting with Heidi.
Sure, you're gonna
Yes.
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 go. Yes.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and let individuals